San Diego's pot shops are seeing green, but will the party last? The busy first week of legal sales and the new threat of a federal crackdown. Horton Plaza's glory days are long gone. What might be done to reinvent the struggling downtown mall? And from Donald Trump's border wall to San Diego's homeless crisis, a look at the big stories to watch in 2018. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, reporter Steve Walsh of KPBS News, Roger Sholey of the San Diego Union Tribune, Art Costanares of La Prensa, and Lisa Halverstadt of Voice of San Diego. Well, it's not exactly happy days are here again, but marijuana users had a special reason to rejoice on New Year's Day as marijuana became legal in California. San Diego is among relatively few cities so far where pot shops are open for business. And Steve, business boomed right out of the chute, did it not?
The lines were long. We went over to the Urban Leaf over in the Bay Park area, and it was pretty much a festive atmosphere here. Lines were going around. People apparently were starting to line up as early as 5 a.m.
So, yeah, so set the scene. It was kind of a party, and you talked to a lot of people there and the folks who were also selling the newly legal pot.
There are T-shirts, massages, but mostly people were there to buy legalized weed. In fact, we were able to sort of sit in on one of the bud tenders who was talking to one of their clients.
So we've got a bite. We want to listen to that, yeah.
I think the market's definitely going to expand. A lot of people were waiting in the wings because it was illegal to actually purchase, and they were scared of going on a list by getting their medical recommendation, right? So now you're seeing those people come in to the shop, and just today, I was helping check people in, and pretty much every single person that walked in had an out-of-state ID, which was interesting. And I'd say 95%.
That was actually a bite we had from the proprietor of that shop.
Will Sen, the owner of Urban Leaf.
And he told the UT the next day that he had like 1,000 customers on that first day.
Right. He was telling me there was 4 times his normal Monday. In fact, he was surprised by how many people were there and didn't quite staff up.
Mm-hmm. Now, oddly, you encountered a lot of people from out of state. Is this going to be a tourist draw in San Diego? Where were they from?
Well, I mean, they're from all over the country. I ran into one woman from Indiana, and I asked, did you come out here just for, recreational marijuana? Well, it's very cold out there in the Midwest. And she said, well, that's not the only reason I came out here. But clearly people were curious. And part of the reason why you're seeing such long lines in San Diego is because they haven't quite gotten the licensing together in L.A. and San Francisco. Mm-hmm. So San Diego right now is the largest city that has recreational marijuana.
Mm-hmm. Roger, you think we're going to have other cities in the county here besides the big dog San Diego?
Well, I mean, there's taxes to reap from this, and so if you're a city with budget problems, you want to get some more taxes, and sales tax will flow from marijuana. There is sort of a social gap here between places that don't mind it and conservatives who don't like it, and then you have the legal issues that the federal government is throwing in this week.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to get to that in a minute. I did want to, to your point, Roger, mention a Pew poll nationally came out today, and it's a dramatic change from just 10 years ago where you had something over 80% of Americans saying pot should be legal in some form, whether it's medicinal or recreational here. Well, Steve, I want to get back to, medicinal marijuana goes all the way back to 96 in California here, but San Diego is typical of a lot of cities, never really quite got a handle on how to work it all out. Are they doing better now with just straight out legal recreational pot?
Well, the way it works now, they've created one set of rules for both medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. There are some changes here. It all has to be in sealed bags now as opposed to when it was just medical marijuana. In fact, we had a couple of people we saw that were going up to staff to try to figure out how to open up those bags. But it's important that they be sealed because if it's in your car, that's just like open container with alcohol, so you can be cited for that.
Mm-hmm. So we have nothing like a bar here. I understand the state of Massachusetts is looking at actually having some parlors or bars, even though they call these...
You still can't smoke in public. Right. You can't have it at a bar. So the rules, it's still mostly for private use at your own home. Yeah. You can't drive with it and smoke.
Well, and that brings up another question. I know, and we've talked about that briefly on the show, that law enforcement officials are trying to figure out how they deal with people who may be driving under the influence of marijuana, and how do you test for that? Are they up to speed on that yet?
They're still working that out. In fact, I believe in the law, some of the tax money goes to the university SDSU, who is trying to work out a field sobriety test for California. Okay.
Now, in your reporting the other day, and all the folks you were talking to, first give us kind of a cross section here. I mean, we'll get to this moment, this here in a moment, on Attorney General Jeff Sessions and him coming out against that. But it seems the thing from his characterization that these are a bunch of California crazy hippies, but that's not really who you're seeing out there.
No, not really. I mean, with recreational marijuana, it goes from 18 years old to 21 years old. When I talked with Will Sen, he said that his average customer was more in the 27 to 50-year-old range, and that's what I saw mostly in line out there. It was an older crowd. A lot of people don't like the idea of registering for a medical marijuana card, so they're bypassing that step. So it's bringing a lot of folks who may have tried at one point but felt uncomfortable joining the system before it was legal recreationally.
So that news this week was that U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is rescinding this Obama-era directive to U.S. attorneys, saying, you know, look the other way, basically. Let's put this way on the back burner and deal with other crimes. And it's really kind of too early to know. It's only happened this week, but what impact might that have in San Diego and elsewhere?
It only really happened this week, the so-called Cole Memorandum that came out during the Obama administration, where they said to lay off any of the states where it had already become legal. Jeff Sessions rescinded that. That kind of sends it back to the local U.S. attorneys general to see U.S. attorneys to see whether or not they want to lead prosecution in these sorts of cases. There was one attorney general, one of the new attorney generals, U.S. attorneys out of Massachusetts, who did send out a release saying that they would look at cases on bulk cultivation, trafficking cases, and people using the federal banking system illegally. That could be a sign that in Massachusetts, which is looking at legalization right now, they could see some cases there. So it seems like the only thing we don't really know. This could really be targeting the apparatus of legalized marijuana. It doesn't seem very likely that it'll go down to the individual user. Though, you know, bottom line, the only thing they can't really stop is probably people who decide to smoke marijuana. Because
well, Lisa, we've got 29 states now that in some form have decriminalized marijuana, either outright for recreational use, as California and other states, or medicinal use. I mean, has that horse sailed already, to mix metaphors, in terms of Sessions wanting to crack down now?
Well, I think what's interesting is you have two dynamics at play here. One is that, you know, you have people on both sides of the aisle, lawmakers in, for example, Colorado and Alaska, who are coming out against this and saying, hey, this is a big business in our state. This is a big
tax
deal.
Generator. Yeah.
Yes. And then you also have the issue that, especially in California and other states, there are a lot of interim U.S. attorneys right now. The Trump administration has not appointed everyone. And so as a result, there's a lot more question of what these folks might want to pursue. San Diego has an interim, I believe his name is Adam Braverman, who has pursued other drug cases throughout his career. I believe he may have given out kind of a tepid statement yesterday that didn't really tell us much. But it's hard to say what might be coming next with this.
Now, before we leave this topic, Steve, I wanted to ask you about, you got a story coming out on KPBS here in a couple of days on the military use. It's still banned by military personnel, even if you're stationed in a state like California.
Right. Still a Schedule I drug under a federal law, and so it's completely banned for military use. The military has a zero tolerance policy, though. Even in the military, we talked to an attorney that handles some of these cases, and they've seen the sentences going down and down. You don't spend time in the brig anymore. You're probably going to go to a captain's mast instead of a trial. But bottom line, you still face, it's very likely that you will be kicked out of the military if you test positive for THC.
Okay, well, lots more to discover and report on as we move forward on that issue into the year. We're going to move on now. Excuse me, it was a retail oasis in the center of a downtown still besought by flop houses and rundown bars and naughty bookstores and tattoo parlors. Horton Plaza, with its funky multi-level layout and bright pastel colors, caught the eye of designers around the world. It opened to great fanfare in August 1985 and was a crowd magnet for years as downtown San Diego developed around it. But those heady days are long gone. Shops and restaurants there have closed, anchor stores abandoned it. Not even Santa Claus showed up, Roger, at Christmas time. What in the heck happened here? Now, is Horton Plaza now a symbol of kind of the internet crushing retail everywhere? And can't we ever bring back Santa Claus? I mean,
well, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and others might show up someday. I think the question is, it's not just Horton Plaza, it's all regional malls are in this issue, this period of changing of retail habits. People go to shops or shopping centers for fun, not so much always for shopping.
Kind of a community plaza thing, but they're ordering stuff.
So in Horton Plaza's case, and you and I have been watching this ever since it was proposed many years ago, it was a unique concept, a unique approach to shopping and malls. It was going to be a mixed-use, multi-level project, as you said. And it was very popular as a tourist site. National architectural critics came and saw it, and still you run into people from France and other around the world who come to it and take pictures, and so it's still a tourist draw. It just is not doing what it was going to do, and that is to provide real shopping in downtown San Diego, which had left after World War II. So it faces a lot of questions that Westfield has not yet decide on what to pursue. And the additional thing that's happened lately was that a French company bought the Westfield chain, and Horton Plaza is part of that. So there are many questions to, are they going to keep it? Are they going to remodel it? Are they going to throw it away? So that's all up in the air.
No, so tell us what it's like down there now. I mean, is it, and you described it in your story, it was built as a fortress. Explain why that was, and that's kind of one of the problems.
Well, you have to take us back to the early 1970s when Horton Plaza was proposed. And San Diego was going downhill downtown. You would not really, respectable people would not go south of Broadway, full of peep shows and X-rated bookstores and bars and things. And it was not, my mother used to say, don't go south of Broadway. I guess I didn't, I remember. But anyway, so Horton Plaza was the solution, the fuse that sparked redevelopment down in San Diego. And they needed the fortress concept because they were afraid that people would not go down to the new shopping center if they were, the ne'er-do-wells would sneak in from the south or the east.
So you had that contained parking structure and, you know, as you say, kind of this oasis fortress, however you want to characterize it.
So nowadays, of course, it's just the reverse. Gaslamp Quarter, East Village are booming, and Horton Plaza is kind of this sorry state that people don't go to for fun as much as they used to.
Right. My wife and I went there for the San Diego Film Festival, and it was really the first time I had been there, and it was hard to figure out where it was and where the entrance was. And we ended up going all the way to the 4th floor for the film fest, and then the shops all closed in the meantime, and then you had to sort of figure out how to...
Of course, that was the idea. It was supposed to be you get there, you trapped, you wouldn't know how to get around, so you go buy some.
Mission accomplished.
Right, mission
accomplished.
And they people still talk about the parking garages that are fruits and vegetables, and you can't remember which level you're on.
Avocado, tomato. I want to go to that store. There's no way to get there from
so
here.
I always, when I went there, when I go there, I always pick the same fruit to go to, so I don't forget.
It's a good strategy.
Once in a while I did forget, and then I was wandered around for 20 minutes looking for the parking space.
Now, your story talks about developer Ernie Hahn predicting the place would be redesigned often over the years, which hasn't really happened, right?
Well, no, it has happened. There have been kind of
tweaks, though, right?
Tweaks, different companies have come in and gone out, and as you said, the original department stores are all gone. Macy's was not Macy's in 1985. It was the Broadway, and Nordstrom is completely gone, and Robinson's building was demolished, and the Mervyn's building is now a grocery store area in the Gap, and the Gap is leaving, actually. So one after the other, these tenants are leaving when their terms expire, and you say, well, why is that? It's because normally in real estate, it's cheaper to take an empty space than to have to pay somebody to leave their lease. So I think Westfield has purposely let these leases expire, and they want to empty out the mall, and they can sell it or redevelop it and not have to pay somebody to stay there.
All right, well, that brings us to the looking forward questions here now. So what are some of the ideas? It seems to me it's kind of a mini version of the Qualcomm Stadium site in Mission Valley, where now it becomes an opportunity of what do you do with this right in the middle of downtown?
Well, the easiest thing would be to re-tenant it and put in all new shops and restaurants and fix it up and glitter it. And
change the structure, get rid of the fortress idea?
Just superficially remodel it. So that's the easiest and probably the most problematic. The next element is can you demolish pieces of it and replace it with other structures? That's expensive, and the most radical would be to demolish the whole thing and start over again.
Oh, just have a lot and build it from the ground up.
Yeah. So Westfield's been talking about this for a decade. Since 2007 and 2008. They've been hiring architects and considering different approaches. And I ask every few months, what are you doing? Oh, we're still discussing it. And now, of course, the ownership has changed. And that's another question, is this foreign company that's very adept at urban development going to keep it and use it as a model for San Diego or for the U.S. mall redevelopment picture?
And are they kind of caught with the music stopped in terms of the internet so rapidly changing over and taking over retail, where so many people, and you can look at the figures, maybe they're not quite out from this recent holiday season, but how many people just bought stuff and had it delivered to their house and really didn't go shop at these?
Well, but look, they just spent $600 million to upgrade UTC. It's another Westfield project. It's been a booming success. Lots of fun to go to. Great things to see and do at UTC. I can imagine it's very easy to do the same thing to Horton.
But are people buying at the stores? Or
yeah, you can see people with packages and they're eating, and so it's still alive. It's still a business that works.
To me, it seems like a generation ago, it was the malls that were pulling business away from traditional downtowns, which had a mixed use of retail and housing. And it seems like that actually would be a really good mix. People now want to live downtown, have put some condos in there, so you have all that wonderful parking. And then you have people living, and then have those stores cater more.
And a lot of people do live
there.
downtown too.
Yeah. So I think that's probably the most likely thing, is that there will be, and other malls have done the same thing. They introduce residential, they introduce office space users into these things, and a hotel. There's already a hotel. There's already office space there to some extent. So I'm guessing that that's probably what they will do. The question is, will Westfield do it, or will they sell it to somebody else? Okay,
we got to move on, but one last quick question. What's the time frame on this? When might something happen?
I've been asking for 6 years, and I haven't heard nothing. They haven't said anything, and
I didn't get the part.
And you're going to be retiring soon, so you got to keep asking here.
I'm thinking this year they will come. They will have to decide something.
Maybe they're waiting for you to go before they come up with an answer.
Roger guy.
As I go up, I'll see you come down. You know?
All right. Well, speaking of the future and looking forward, let's move on to our next topic. Many of us are still reeling from the pace of news coming at us in 2017. No time to catch your breath. 2018 hit the ground running with Donald Trump tweeting furiously as ever, and just plain furious over a new book blasting him and his family this week. Controversial Trump policies continue to have a big impact in San Diego. So let's start with the dreamers. The clock is ticking on these young, undocumented residents here. Trump and the Republicans are going to work something out with the Democrats soon, because there is a deadline, right?
It just doesn't seem likely. We all remember when Trump first came in and he canceled DACA. He gave until March to have a solution for Congress to act.
Remind listeners who we're talking about here.
Sure. These are, they call them dreamers. DACA was a deferred action on childhood arrivals. These are now young adults that came in as minors. They're undocumented, but now they have registered. The fingerprints or backgrounds are in the system. They've gone to school. Some have served in the military. They're graduates. They're working. They're tax-paying adults. And they're at risk of being deported starting in March.
And they had protections under a plan that was from the Obama administration, and that Trump let that lapse last fall, and now we're coming up on, a March deadline, right?
Yeah, March deadline, and even the original applications took 90 days to process. We're already in the 90-day process, and Congress hasn't even acted yet. The danger is that the Republicans and Trump are connecting it to funding the border wall, and that's going to be a non-starter for Democrats.
Right.
It's going to be very divisive. It's an issue that has to be taken care of on its own.
And that brings me to my next question here, and we're showing there a moment ago some of the border wall prototypes that are down there near the existing border wall, which we've talked about on this show. That wall going to be built this year? What's the prospects for that?
Congress hasn't funded any of it at all. They're estimating it could be $20 to $40 billion to build. They want to start with a segment here in San Diego. And a lot of experts say it's just unnecessary. The border crossings are down at historic levels. Technology, drones, all these different things that can be used instead of building this massive Berlin Wall along our trading partner.
And there's a lot of politicians on both sides of the aisle from border states who aren't all that keen on spending that
Texas,
money.
Arizona, and California, Democrats and Republicans.
And Republicans, yeah,
Absolutely.
as well. All right, let's talk for a minute about immigration reform in general. Of course, there's a lot of ink in 2017 about Trump's ban on travelers from certain countries that remains in effect pending legislation here. What about bipartisan immigration reform? That was all teed up and set to go a few years ago. The GOP killed it. Prospects for that?
We haven't seen any bipartisan work on anything. The Republicans go behind the scenes. They did this new tax plan. And when you look at the things that cause division, one of the things that nobody's talked about in the tax plan is that people that have been under what they call a temporary ID number for filing taxes, 4.4 million people filed for the child tax credit last year. They are now exempted or now excluded in filing under the new tax plan. That's about $6 billion that now got sucked out of the pockets of people like Dreamers. And so when you try to get bipartisan support, and one of the things that you bury into this tax plan, which was a big tax cut, is hurting the very people that you want to get buy-in from.
Right.
It just leads to this division and mistrust. So I don't think it's going to get done in a bipartisan way. I think Republicans have to come to the table and come up with a real solution.
All right, well, talking of vexing problems, Lisa, I wanted to turn to homelessness and our housing crisis. We've talked a lot on this show about that. It's an election year, and we're going to see some ballot proposals locally here, are we not? And without exhausting us and ruining all the rest of our time, voters might start preparing themselves.
Yes, get ready. So there is one measure that for sure is going on the ballot. That's a state-level measure. It's a bond, a $3 billion bond that could generate, they're estimating, about 20,000 homes. But there are discussions about a handful of different measures in San Diego. We'll go through them quickly. One, City Councilman David Alvarez is looking at potentially kind of holding on to all the excess additional hotel tax revenue that comes in specifically for homeless housing services and needs. Then you've got this group of business folks and labor leaders who are negotiating on a potential convention center measure, which would actually be an increase in hotel taxes that would have, different portions of it go to fund a convention center expansion and then also road repairs and homelessness. The mayor, you may remember, had a similar measure last year that fell apart. One of the big sticking points was that folks on the labor side didn't think there was enough money going to homelessness. So that's going to be a big sticking point in those negotiations. Then you also have a measure that the San Diego Housing Federation, an affordable housing lobbying group, is working on that would be just about a $900 million bond, a property tax increase. This is similar to what other communities in California passed in 2016. And they're thinking that they could build at least 7,500 homes with this money, with a portion of that going to homelessness, also to folks who are disabled, also seniors, families, housing for all of the above. And then finally, there is a fifth measure that's being bandied about by a couple businessmen that would fund both temporary and permanent housing.
Okay, and that's just what we're talking about locally, right?
Yes, that's just local.
There's state measures as well, and I won't have you go through all of those such as
Get ready for some studying.
Yeah, it's going to be a crazy ballot this year and quite the election year moving forward. Well, that's going to be obviously one of the huge stories, the election itself and all the various aspects. Roger, what big issue do you see making news this week, or this year, that is? We did touch on the whole opportunity challenge in Mission Valley at that old Qualcomm Stadium.
Well, that's, as you mentioned, the ballot measure, the ballot will be very long because there'll be two measures on the redevelopment of SDCCU Qualcomm Stadium, Soccer City versus San Diego State. The San Diego State people are about to file their signatures.
And they're going to have enough, right?
And they'll probably have enough next week, is what we hear. And you mentioned the convention center, that may also be on the ballot. The Port District has a slew of things going on. I just got an update on the Manchester's Navy Broadway complex that they're hoping to start construction in the middle of the year on this $1.2 billion redevelopment of the waterfront. Seaport Village's redevelopment, Harbor Island redevelopment, Balboa Park, one of your favorite topics, the Plaza de Panama question, is that going to be done? Comic-Con is opening a museum, I guess 2019, and they're going to be planning on that. Downtown, besides Horton Plaza, one of my favorite things to look for is the old courthouse that was just vacated when they moved to the new one. That 3-block area on Broadway is going to be the subject of a RFP that the county is working on. Yeah, it could be housing. And related, another redevelopment, which I think is going to be very much in the news, is the San Diego Unified School District wants to sell its or trade its education center for another headquarters someplace, and that's like.
And they are also talking about a ballot measure. There's also talk of ballot measures to, regulate how folks get on their board.
And then the final big issue in our redevelopment or development world is Airbnb. What's going to happen to vacation rentals? Are they going to finally select something? So that's another big question. So we have all year with
another one I'm lucky enough to work on.
Yes.
Yeah, and
great year.
And Steve, just to round us out and finish out here, maybe we're going to have a war with somebody at some point, and the military's on alert.
Well, that's true. I mean, as a military reporter, the big question for the last year has been, like, how seriously do you take Donald Trump? There was talk of a 355-ship Navy, which would mean a lot of money in San Diego. And, all the saber-rattling related to North Korea. Could we actually be in a war by this time this year? It's very hard to get a sense of what may or may not stick. We look at the ban on transgender people entering the military. It sounded like Trump was not going to allow that. The military seems to have overruled that, and it went into effect at the beginning of this week. So how much of what Donald Trump says will actually translate into policy?
Well, we're going to find out. We are out of time, but a lot of fascinating stuff, and it'll keep us in business here on this show going forward in 2018. Well, that does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Steve Walsh of KPBS News, Roger Scholey of the San Diego Union Tribune, Art Castellares of La Prensa, and Lisa Halverstadt of Voice of San Diego. And a reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.